Ethan's boots clicked against the polished metal floor of the Andromeda Central Spaceport, a rhythm that was supposed to make him look confident, but mostly just reminded him how badly he had misjudged the width of his own stride. The port was a chaotic ballet of alien vendors, whirring hovercarts, and the occasional shriek of a security drone zipping past at impossible speeds. Ethan juggled a coffee cup in one hand, his travel bag in the other, and a clipboard that insisted on folding in on itself whenever he looked away. He muttered under his breath as a hovercart full of glowing energy cores swerved around him, nearly causing him to perform an impromptu somersault he was sure would have impressed no one. He was about to curse the universe when a sudden flash of movement caught his eye. A figure, tall, graceful, and very clearly not human, was maneuvering through the crowd like she belonged to every shadow and corner of the port. Her long ears flicked once, twice, catching sounds and signals that Ethan couldn't hope to notice. At first glance, she could have been a human woman, but there was an elegance to her that spoke of speed, precision, and a very particular danger. She wasn't just moving, she was gliding, each step measured, her presence demanding attention without ever seeming to ask for it. Ethan, attempting what he thought was subtle, stepped back, tripping over a crate of spare mech parts and spilling his coffee into an unfortunate vendor's display of anti-grav tools. "Ah, sorry, really sorry," he mumbled, cheeks heating. He looked up and the woman's amber eyes, sharp, calculating but with a flicker of amusement, found his. She cocked her head, one ear twitching, and for a split second Ethan thought she might be judging him. Instead, she let out a sound that was somewhere between a snort and a laugh. "Careful, human," she said, voice smooth, tinged with humor, "or the universe will judge you faster than your own feet can." Ethan opened his mouth to apologize further, but the words stumbled out like an awkward algorithm crashing mid-process. I'm Ethan," he stammered. The alien woman raised an eyebrow, amused, as if she were deciding whether or not she should file him under harmlessly entertaining. What? Before either of them could continue this fragile exchange, the spaceport erupted into chaos. Armored enforcers, their helmets gleaming and weapons humming with lethal energy, barreled through the crowd. Shouts and alarms collided with the hum of anti-grav engines. The alien woman stiffened, her posture suddenly sharp with purpose. Ethan, who had never been mistaken for heroic, felt a cold jolt of fear and fascination. I should probably hide," he muttered, though it came out more as a question than a declaration. She looked at him, a corner of her mouth twitching, and then, almost as if deciding that he might be more amusing alive than squashed, she grabbed his arm with surprising strength and yanked him behind a stack of crates. "You're surprisingly squishable," she said, voice low, with the faintest edge of humor. Ethan blinked. "I'm what?" He tried to look offended but realized that his mug of spilled coffee and disheveled appearance made any protest laughable. "They'll be here in seconds," she continued, scanning the crowd with those long, calculating ears. "Do you move fast?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Depends on whether I trip over the floor or my own feet." The corners of her mouth twitched again, but she didn't laugh aloud yet. The enforcers passed, scanning the crowd with lethal precision, and Ethan realized he had done little more than practice breathing exercises behind a crate. Kelara, he'd learned her name after she muttered it under her breath, pulled him up, dragging him into an open transport crate labeled for rare mineral cores. Ethan nearly screamed in protest. "What?" You can't just shove me in here." Kelara's long ears twitched in amusement. "You move strangely, you'd get caught, trust me." The crate's lid closed with a soft hiss, and Ethan found himself in darkness, with only Kelara's presence beside him. He coughed. "You're quiet when you're plotting death, aren't you?" She rolled her eyes. "Plotting death is tedious. Humor is more efficient in confusion." Ethan couldn't see her expression, but he imagined the twitch of her ears and the smirk on her face. He snorted, nearly tripping over a support beam inside the crate. Hours later, hyperspace swallowed the transport, the stars stretching into long, silvery streaks. Ethan, sitting cross-legged and trying to avoid knocking over their supplies, looked at Kelara. "So, you're a warrior?" he asked. The question was simple, but the answer, he knew, would be complicated. "I was trained to handle destruction," she said, "but sometimes humans are more unpredictable than plasma cannons, and apparently more entertaining." Ethan laughed, imagining himself as entertaining in her eyes, a small comfort in the midst of chaos. He was beginning to suspect that this journey would be less about avoiding death and more about surviving Kelara's dry humor. They exchanged stories in the dim crate light, Kelara teasing him relentlessly about human stubbornness, Ethan trying and failing to impress her with technical knowledge about plasma reactors. At one point, he accidentally triggered a holographic display of star charts, projecting a tiny star system onto the crate wall. "Ah, yes," Kelara said, arching an eyebrow. "Humans have mastered the art of accidentally summoning light shows during crises." Ethan bowed theatrically, earning a soft snort from her. As the vessel hummed through hyperspace, a bond began to form, not a sudden cinematic spark, but a gradual acknowledgement of trust, curiosity, and humor. Ethan learned to watch her ears for subtle cues. Kelara learned to anticipate his bumbling but surprisingly clever improvisations. In a universe filled with plasma weapons, rogue mercenaries, and collapsing colonies, it was these small, humanizing moments that hinted at something more. By the time the stars returned to points of light instead of streaks, Ethan had begun to feel a strange certainty that surviving Kelara's company might be as challenging as surviving the universe and far more rewarding. And Kelara, for her part, seemed to find his clumsy resilience and his endless capacity for awkward jokes curiously grounding, a rare anchor amid the chaos she had always known. When the crate finally opened on a remote outpost orbiting a gas giant, Ethan tumbled out first, landing in a heap with a thud. Kelara extended a hand, long ears twitching as she helped him up. "Welcome to your next mistake," she said, voice teasing but with an undercurrent of sincerity. Ethan accepted it, wobbly but grinning. "If by mistake you mean adventure," he replied, "then I'm ready." What? Kelara's amber eyes softened just slightly. "Good," she said, "because in the next few days you'll either be incredibly lucky or incredibly ridiculous, preferably both." And with that, they stepped into the alien city together, the hum of engines and the glow of neon lights reflecting off their figures, as laughter and danger mingled in equal measure. The first chapter closed not with the promise of calm, but with the understanding that humor, courage, and a curious connection could be as potent as any plasma weapon in the galaxy. Ethan followed Kelara through the narrow corridors of the orbiting mining colony, his boots clanging against the metal walkways in a rhythm that made him feel like a marching band of one. She moved ahead with the precision of someone born to navigate danger, her long ears flicking at every subtle sound, while he trailed behind, muttering warnings to himself about tripping over gravity stabilizers or accidentally setting off warning alarms. "Why do all your corridors feel like obstacle courses designed to humiliate me?" he asked, grabbing a railing that promptly detached from the wall. Kelara glanced back, one eyebrow arched, and for the briefest moment her lips quirked. "It's not designed to humiliate you," she said smoothly, "but I cannot promise the universe won't." The colony itself was a spectacle of engineering gone slightly rogue. Grav lifts that should have been routine occasionally flickered and spat out sparks, robotic mining drones wandered into hallways as if auditioning for a slapstick comedy, and overhead, plasma storms raged through the gas giant's upper atmosphere, painting the sky in streaks of violent electric blue. Ethan, juggling a toolkit he didn't entirely understand, muttered, "I feel like we're walking through a sci-fi theme park where everything wants to maim us." Kelara's ears twitched, a signal she had taught Ethan meant she found him amusing. "Only you would think surviving plasma storms is entertainment," she said. They reached a central chamber where the colony's core processors glowed with soft amber light. Kelara stepped forward, scanning the machinery with practiced eyes. "If we can recalibrate these stabilizers," she said, "we might be able to mask our heat signature from the patrol drones. That, and prevent the colony from spontaneously combusting, which is always a plus." Ethan peered at the complex array of conduits and glowing control panels. "I think I understand 10% of this. The other 90% is terrifying," he admitted. She laughed, a sound sharp and melodic, which made him forget momentarily that a misstep here could result in an unplanned cremation. Ethan's first attempt at recalibrating the stabilizers was less than ideal. Sparks flew, a panel flashed red, and a small drone zoomed past, beeping angrily. Kelara pinched the bridge of her nose. "You are delightfully persistent," she said, tugging him aside before he could accidentally electrocute himself. Ethan leaned back, grinning sheepishly. "I call it creative problem-solving, or, survival by pure dumb luck." Kelara's ears twitched again. "Luck is not a strategy, human, but your brand of chaos has a certain charm." What? Their work was interrupted by the arrival of mercenaries, hulking figures with armor that gleamed under the colony lights, weapons that pulsed with lethal energy, and an unmistakable intent to capture Kelara. Ethan, caught mid-spark adjustment, froze. Kelara's eyes narrowed. "Stay behind me," she said, voice calm but carrying a steel edge. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded, then promptly tripped over a stray cable, sending a toolkit tumbling across the floor. One of the mercenaries glared, and Kelara muttered, "I did not say it was going to be graceful." What followed was a dance of chaos and strategy. Ethan improvised, pressing random buttons that activated decoy holograms, images of himself gesturing wildly while Kelara darted through the shadows. The mercenaries paused, confused by a hologram that appeared to be waving and screaming at them simultaneously. "I think it's working," Ethan said nervously. Kelara, using the distraction, disabled a gravity field beneath the attackers, sending them tumbling into a stack of energy crates with a collective crash and an assortment of cursing that echoed through the chamber. After the immediate danger passed, Kelara leaned against a console, breathing steadily. Ethan collapsed beside her, brushing soot from his clothes. "You know," he said, "we make a pretty great team. If by great team you mean mostly me panicking while you fix everything." She smirked, ears flicking forward. "Your panic is a surprisingly effective tactic," she admitted, "and your accidental genius has saved my life more than once." Ethan tried to bow but ended up hitting his head on the console. Kelara laughed, soft and musical, a sound that lingered longer than any warning alarm ever could. They moved through the colony, evading patrol drones and navigating malfunctioning grav lifts, each step punctuated by Ethan's jokes about how he was apparently a magnet for disaster, and Kelara's dry, sarcastic commentary on the curious resilience of humans. "Do all humans really think they can outrun technology by running in circles?" she asked once, watching him trip over a power conduit. "Apparently," he said, flailing his arms for balance, "it's a highly respected art form where I come from." What? Night, or what counted as night in a colony bathed in neon glows and plasma storms, fell over the gas giant. Ethan and Kelara found temporary refuge on a cliffside platform overlooking the storm. The winds buffeted them, carrying the smell of ozone and ionized air. Ethan shivered. "I feel like we're in a disaster postcard," he said. Kelara tilted her head, one ear twitching. "I suppose it's scenic in a violent, potentially lethal sort of way," she replied. He laughed, tugging his jacket tighter. "That's one way to describe our life together, scenic and terrifying." What? They shared a quiet moment, punctuated by the distant hum of plasma engines and the occasional screech of a misfiring drone. Kelara looked at Ethan, her eyes softening for a brief instant. "You know," she said, "humans are more adaptable than I expected, and slightly ridiculous, which is oddly endearing." Ethan grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment. Slightly ridiculous is my brand." Kelara's lips quirked. "Good. You will need that brand to survive the coming days." As the wind howled, Ethan felt an odd sense of calm, a strange mix of adrenaline and humor keeping his fear at bay. Kelara glanced at him, her long ears twitching, a subtle signal he had come to recognize as a mix of caution and amusement. "You're annoying in the best possible way," she said, "and lucky, though I suspect you don't know it yet." Ethan laughed. "I'm keeping score. How many close calls does it take before I get a medal?" She shook her head, but there was a glint in her eyes. "Keep moving, human. Survive first. Medals are optional." What? They spent the rest of the night navigating through malfunctioning corridors, improvising through energy surges and plasma leaks, their laughter and quips providing an unlikely shield against the danger surrounding them. Each accident and misstep became a testament to their growing bond, an understanding that even in a universe full of deadly weapons and mercenary hunters, connection, humor, and trust could become a survival strategy. By dawn, they reached a small maintenance bay where they could rest, exhausted but alive. Ethan sprawled across a bench, grinning despite bruises and soot. Kelara adjusted a few panels, her ears twitching in thought. "You're hopelessly human," she said. Ethan sat up, smirking. "Thank you, I try." She shook her head, amused, yet there was warmth in her gaze that he couldn't mistake. "Tomorrow you will need more than jokes," she said, "but today your ridiculousness saved us both." Ethan nodded solemnly, then added, "I'll keep practicing. Comedy and survival together." Kelara allowed herself a small, rare smile, and for a moment the hum of the colony felt almost like a lullaby. They sat there, side by side, sharing the kind of quiet companionship that needed no words beyond humor and trust. In a world of plasma storms and rogue mercenaries, laughter had become as vital a weapon as any. Ethan and Kelara floated above Novra City in a stolen hovercraft, the neon glow of the urban sprawl stretching below them like spilled paint over black metal. Plasma turrets dotted the skyline, blinking red warnings and threatening sudden incineration, but Ethan, clutching the console with white-knuckled determination, couldn't help joking. "I swear, Kelara, if one of those things shoots at us, I'll take full responsibility for screaming." Kelara's long ears twitched in amusement as she surveyed the city below, her amber eyes calculating every patrol route, every turret angle. "Your screaming is the least of our problems," she said, voice dry but carrying the faintest trace of fondness. "Although I admit it's entertaining." The mission was clear. Infiltrate the corporation's central command, disarm the plasma weapons threatening the sector, and survive long enough to see breakfast without being vaporized. Ethan, who had spent the past several days tripping over alien technology, now found himself oddly calm, a confidence tempered by experience, adrenaline, and a ridiculous sense of humor. He glanced at Kelara, noting the subtle twitch of her ears that betrayed her own tension. So, heroic plan, we barge in, disable the world-ending devices, and casually walk out like it's a spa retreat. Kelara shook her head, smirking. Only your version would make a spa retreat sound dangerous, but yes, roughly. They landed on a rooftop adjacent to the facility, blending shadows with neon lights and dodging patrol drones that buzzed like oversized metallic mosquitoes. Ethan immediately tripped over a ventilation duct, sprawling into a puddle of rainwater that shimmered with ionized residue. I call that my dramatic entrance, he declared, giving Kelara a thumbs up. She groaned, tugging him to his feet. You really need to consider a less slapstick approach to infiltration. Ethan grinned and robbed the universe of my flair, never. What? Inside the facility, alarms blared, lights flashed, and plasma conduits hummed with energy potent enough to melt steel. Kelara moved with lethal grace, disabling security drones with precise flicks of her wrist, while Ethan improvised diversions. Tripping over wires, hitting random buttons, and accidentally activating a cleaning robot that chased a group of guards in wild loops around the hallways. I think we just created chaos therapy, Ethan said, ducking a plasma pulse that sizzled where he had just stood. Kelara allowed herself a brief laugh. It is unexpectedly effective, she admitted, long ears flicking with each calculated movement. They reached the weapon core, a towering lattice of energy conduits and humming plasma matrices, its control panels glowing with dangerous intent. Kelara studied it, fingers moving over alien glyphs and input ports. If I miscalculate, she said quietly, we're all toast. Ethan peered over her shoulder. And by toast you mean crispy breakfast. She gave him a look sharp enough to cut through alloy. Do not make breakfast jokes, it's not funny. Ethan grinned, too late, already funny. As she worked, a group of mercenaries breached the room. Ethan, in a combination of panic and inspiration, flailed toward the console, accidentally sending a holographic projection of himself waving and screaming at the attackers. The mercenaries froze, unsure which Ethan to target, giving Kelara just enough time to override the plasma weapons safety protocols. Sparks flew, energy crackled, and a low hum escalated to a violent pitch. Kelara's fingers danced over the controls, her focus absolute, her ears twitching in subtle signals of alertness and concentration. Ethan, meanwhile, tripped over a power conduit, sliding across the floor in a spectacular arc. I call this tactical repositioning, he wheezed. With a final keystroke, the weapons powered down, the hum of destruction giving way to silence. Ethan blinked, looking at Kelara with awe. You did it. She allowed herself a small, rare smile. We did it, she corrected, eyes softening, and your unique contribution helped. Ethan grinned despite soot and bruises. I'll take that. Teamwork makes the dream work, or at least prevents planetary annihilation. Kelara's lips quirked, the faintest warmth in her gaze. You are hopelessly human, she said. They slipped from the collapsing facility just as emergency systems triggered, corridors collapsing in controlled explosions. Ethan managed to trip over a support beam one last time, earning a grunt from Kelara, but they both laughed as they emerged onto the rooftop, the night sky ablaze with neon reflections. We survived, Ethan said, brushing off debris. I can't believe it. Kelara's amber eyes met his, serious now, and for the first time without humor in her tone, she said, not only did you survive, you adapted. Faster than I expected, and you kept your sense of humor. Ethan blinked. I grew. Kelara's ears twitched. You learned that survival isn't just about strength or firepower. Sometimes it's about trust, creativity, and yes, laughter. What? As they floated above the city in the repaired hovercraft, Ethan felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and calm. He had stumbled through danger, made mistakes, yet discovered courage he didn't know he possessed. Kelara, who had always relied on precision and training, found herself relying on Ethan's unpredictable resourcefulness, his human chaos that somehow balanced her methodical planning. Humor had become their shield, trust their weapon, and connection their ultimate strategy. Ethan reached over, brushing soot from Kelara's shoulder. So, what now? Do we retire to a quiet planet and sip coffee without being shot at? Kelara's lips quirked in the faintest smile. I doubt it, but we do survive together, and perhaps we continue being ridiculous. Ethan grinned, long ears twitching in imitation of hers. Then I'm fully committed to ridiculousness. Right next to you. Kelara looked out at the horizon, the glow of distant stars reflecting in her amber eyes. The universe will never be boring with you around, she said softly. Hovering in the calm after the storm, Ethan realized that he had changed. Fear no longer dominated his decisions. Humor had become a strategy, and trust, strangely, wonderfully, had become a source of strength. Kelara, too, had shifted, learning that perfection wasn't always the solution, that unpredictability could be an ally, and that connection could be more potent than any plasma weapon she had ever encountered. They watched the city below, a mosaic of neon and shadow, knowing the corporation's plans were foiled, the plasma weapons neutralized, and the galaxy safe at least for now. Ethan leaned back, sighing contentedly. "We did good," he said. Kilara's ears flicked once, a signal Ethan had learned meant agreement. "Yes," she said, "better than good, remarkable in fact, and you are remarkably human." Ethan chuckled, nudging her shoulder playfully. "I'll take that as a compliment. Even if it comes from a long-eared alien badass who could vaporize me in 2 seconds." Kilara smirked, her eyes softening with a warmth she rarely displayed. "It's a compliment," she confirmed, "and perhaps something more." Ethan's grin widened, not because of what was said, but because he knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together, with humor, courage, and a bond stronger than any weapon the galaxy could produce.